Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Simon Sullivan. I'm the chair of this committee. So my first duty is to remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed on the internet for live and subsequent broadcast. So please can we keep this in mind when speaking. The press and public can record and take photos if they wish to. The next item on our agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies? On the council part? Okay, so next week. Okay. We've not had any apologies. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Can all members declare in pecuniary or not, or other interests as listed on the agenda now, or before the relevant item, please? So, invitations. We move on to the next item on the agenda, which is action notes. Can members agree that action notes on the last meeting, please advise if there are any points of correction? The action tracker is promoting points, so can we agree those?
Chair, if I could just highlight, there was some information circulated this week, the second action next week about the funding, so I just wanted to bring that to members' attention so that to make sure that you'd all see that.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to the main item of the agenda, which is the employment skills inquiry evidence gathering. We have, well, just to remind our guests today and members, the key questions we are asking as outlined in section 1 of the cover document on page 11 in your agenda pack is how is the council responding to the breaking down of the barriers report? And what is the vision for lifelong learning and skills across the city? Also listed in this document are some key questions that we are seeking further information on. I'd like to welcome the attendees today from Birmingham Education Partnership, and we are expecting Birmingham Children's Trust as well, although Jane seems to be really late. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time out to join us today. Now, we've got some sort of time frame set on the agenda, so hopefully after the presentation, members will get an opportunity to ask questions. So without further ado, I would hand over to yourself, Tim. If you could go through some of the key points of your presentation, and then we'll follow up with questions.
Thank you. Okay. Well, can I say thank you very much for inviting us. It's really good to be here. We are more used to appearing at oversight and scrutiny for children and young people, and so it's nice to meet a different group of councillors and see a different layout. It feels very different from scrutiny in a big room down the corridor. Can I start where people represent? It'd be really good to know who's going. I haven't done my research well enough, obviously.
Mostly.
Wonderful. Wardsley Green. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I represent Wall Green.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So, just to explain, Tim Boyce, Chief Executive of the Birmingham Education Partnership, since it was launched in 2013, and sitting beside me is Ruth Broom. You invited me to come and give evidence because I am responsible for that. Ruth is the person who leads all our careers work, so whenever I say persuade you to come with me, I thought you'd be helped by having a real expert in the room. And because you're a group of members who we don't normally report to or talk to, I thought it might be helpful to explain kind of a tiny bit about who we are, if you haven't got that already. So Birmingham Education Partnership, launched in 2013 by head teachers with the support of the council, really was an attempt to try and hold the family of Birmingham schools together at a point where the council's resource was diminishing, where academisation was splitting the school world up. We very much wanted to keep picture of lifelong learning, fantastic.
Different room every time. So it's here a bit more, a bit more room. Yes. Thank you.
So lovely to meet you both. Just to introduce myself. When BET was set up, it was very much as a desire to enable partners to work well with schools. It's really difficult for partners, so employers, as an obvious example, to engage with 450 different schools. But it is worth flagging up that we're not the local authority. We don't have huge resources behind us. We're a charity. My boss and chair of BET is Baroness Estelle Morris. So we have some calibre in terms of former Secretary of State supporting us in our governance. And life changed for us really in 2015 when various events conspired to cause the council to commission BET to be the school improvement provider for the city. So our main work is to deliver the council's responsibilities for school improvement, which is fosters preparation, schools causing concern, and some on outcomes for the 50-ish% of Birmingham schools that are still maintained. But the reason for explaining our first bit of our genesis is because we are equally as interested in and facing and focused on all the academies, free schools, everybody delivering a mainstream state-funded education in Birmingham. And so as such, our mission is to improve the outcomes of all Birmingham's children. And that obviously means that we're interested in their ultimate destination through into the workplace. So that's kind of how we come to be in this space. What happened was really at outset we started to orientate ourselves, and before we had the commission from the City Council, our two big priorities were reading for all sorts of reasons, and kind of employability and the transition into the workplace. So we then had an interesting journey with the Careers and Enterprise Company. And this is quite an important part of the story, because BET has at no point had the resource or the autonomy to say this is what we would like to do. What we did was respond to the fact that central government had a scheme that was a 50% match funding scheme that said we're not giving this to councils, we need somebody else to be a partner for the Careers and Enterprise Company centrally to deliver the government strategy that came through the Careers and Enterprise Company. And so generally, LEPs were looked to. Birmingham Solihull LEP didn't particularly want to hold responsibility for this. And so we ended up being kind of broker, the in-between person. And that's really grown because we've become the substantive employer and the holder of the team, which from a central government point of view is the main resource to help with the kind of inter-employment piece in Birmingham schools, if that makes sense. So our partners in what we're presenting are very much the Careers and Enterprise Company and Birmingham Solihull LEP. And as with our work in school improvement and our whole raison d'etre, our number one partner in everything is Birmingham City Council, because we know we don't lead the city, we know that we are a servant and a facilitator of yourselves as elected members. So there will be some elected members who think, why is this independent charity company doing work that really is kind of council work? And that's the answer. The answer is because central government designed things and the city's capacity and autonomy in spaces is also diminished. But my background is as a secondary head teacher for 15 years, and as such, there is nothing more important than actually knowing where your children end up. Actually, for all of my life as a secondary head, I did quite well because I knew how to get results, and that's our job. Sadly, that amounts to nothing if a kid gets really good grades and then drops out in their first year at sixth form college, and actually life circumstances mean that they drop out of university or they don't find a good first place in the job market. So, given a little bit of autonomy, there's nothing we'd rather be impacting in, because it's such a sensible, fundamental objective of the whole education system in the city. But it isn't the one, this is really important, it isn't the one that head teachers are geared up to. Head teachers are geared up to getting results. So what I'm going to do is, I'm conscious with scrutiny committees is that you get a flood of information, and when Ruth, who's the author, really gave me this 21 slide deck, I said, oh, that's far too many. But actually it's a really good slide deck. So I'm going to whiz through it very lightly, and then I'm going to hope that you've got good questions, which probably means I'll hand it to Ruth much more. So have you got the presentation on your system? I'll kind of tell you what slide I'm on if you're looking at it yourself. I'm on slide 2 now, that's great. And so who are we? Well, we kind of, in this world where in the good old days, you could say, well, it's the city or it's the city council, and things are straightforward. What happens now is everybody wants an identity. And so all our funders want to know that they've got an identity. And as I say, we work to the Careers and Enterprise Company strategy. So we are this thing called the Careers Hub, but that's basically a team of folks inside there, and we're funded by the LEP and Careers and Enterprise Company. But importantly, that hub's work is to generate, to draw in a network of all the schools in Birmingham. So we have, by different counts, depending how you count the all through schools, something like 81 secondary schools, with another 8 or 9 all through schools. And then, of course, there are other partners, FE colleges and the like. So to say we have 108 institutions in our hub is quite impressive. It's very much majority coverage. And by comparison with similar projects elsewhere in the country, we're doing well on that score. And we have a kind of a balance to the schools that are already engaged or providers, and that is our employers. And so our cornerstone employers, you can see them in that slide. There's some big hitters, there's some key people. And we've always, from the very beginning, taken a kind of a sector-orientated approach to how we develop the careers work. There are people who won't be represented in that cornerstone employers group who we have a lot to do with. And we're very much dependent on employers and the sector, different sectors we work with, putting in resource. Dan Lockweeton is serving Birmingham Head, but significantly at the Aston University Engineering Academy, which is the most vocationally orientated, high aspiring, interesting bit on the landscape. Not something that that the traditional school model would expect to see there. That he previously to his school now, he worked in mainstream ordinary secondary and is a really good champion for us. So I started off by saying I'm a secondary head by trade, and heads are driven by results. The truth is that all the research shows good outcomes in academic qualifications have a direct relationship to employability. And so this is, to me, the best slide in the whole deck. I'd really like you to just look at it a little bit. So I'm on slide 3. Because what that slide shows you is one of those classic stories that Birmingham doesn't own well enough, which is that actually education in Birmingham is really rather good. Because education outcomes everywhere are most influenced by poverty. And so it's not surprising that in our big cities and in places like Birmingham, where we carry more poverty, that education outcomes aren't as good as they are in the wealthiest parts of the country. But without being deterministic about it, that's just a reason for comparing us to core cities and our statistical neighbours. Nobody's doing that, obviously. What's significant is that Birmingham is the blue line. Where everything starts going down is the pandemic. So we've all had a pandemic, and every measure has suffered as a result of the pandemic. But the blue line of Birmingham is above all of our statistical comparators and is really closing on national. And that's great news. So there is one story to say that it's reasonable that those of us engaged in this sector, in this area of education and young people into skills and employment, have something to celebrate. Because if we look at the key measures of perhaps all of our 16-year-olds, there is an encouraging story here, and we think that's really important. So that's kind of number one. But if we're going to talk about what we're doing to really address the Breaking Down Barriers report and your focus on what are we really doing to get the most vulnerable young people to have better opportunities of getting into employment, it's worth saying that education outcomes given, and that I'm not going to dwell on more, we can come back if you want to. What our work in this very specific, what can we do to fuel the careers world and build the strengths of young people to access employability? We work to the Gatsby benchmarks, and the Gatsby benchmarks are internationally respected research and evidence. There's a set of conditions, behaviours, activities that we know increase the young person's opportunities. That's basically a number of structured, meaningful encounters with the world of work through their education will result in better opportunity and access to education. And so everything that we do now is on our workshops. If you want to chip in,
No, I was going to say you're on the next slide.
I'm on the next slide already. Oh, dear. Thank you. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to whiz through really fast because I will talk too much. Everything that you see on all the subsequent slides is an expression of Gatsby benchmarks.
GATSB.
That's right, yeah. And so these headings of these slides are kind of worth just copying. How well is careers awareness, is the world of work embedded in the curriculum? And what you've got here is a wonderful range of examples of what we do across 108 settings that are engaged with the hub, and they're exemplified by real life schools. And because they're all good news stories, we've got no problem with telling you who the schools are. So this is Fairfax up in the top of Sutton Coldfield, and what this reflects is Gatsby benchmark 4, which we think is a really key one, is one that the government has asked us to prioritise, and this shows that nearly 80% of all of those 108 are successfully linking maths, English, science, and PHSE into careers. And this is an example of how one school has got a plan and committing to do that. I'll move on and happy to take questions on any of this. So, next slide, thank you. And this is based on Eden Boys School, and a newer school in Perry Barr, and it's looking at some of the very particular things they've done here with the Royal Navy, looking at computing, mechanical engineering, and science, to show how they've built very particular workshops and experiences that are integrated into the curriculum, or how the workplace comes into school. So you've got the example of Holyhead, great 11 to 18 school up at the top end of Soho Road, bringing clinicians in from the QE to visit the school, very specifically to help young people understand the routes into careers in medicine. Transferable skills. Huge. Next slide. Thank you. Well done, Ruth. See why I had to bring it. It's a huge challenge that young people respond well to a teacher. They like the subject, but how much you give them skills they will really take them to use in other places is kind of key. So embedding transferable skills is another key Gatsby objective. Here's another great example of the kind of planning and work that our careers team, supported by industry, achieved with an individual school. This is Hillcrest, so a single-sex girls' school over in kind of Clinton area. I'm waiting to have the examples that sit from your patches, and I think some will come up, so I'm optimistic. And then, building on that, transferable skills, schools that make people work ready. And here, it's Wheelers Lane in Hall Green. It's in Kingsey. There we go. All right. It's close. So I'm on the next slide, and so here this is about work ready skills illustrated by Calthorpe Special School, right in the centre of town up in Highgate. Wheelers Lane, we've got Washington Heath and Victoria School there in Northfield, where their work again, particularly looking at transition into the NHS, is building transferable skills. So through structured special activities in school that bring employers into school and help build schools. And everything we're talking about so far is the universal. This is what we're trying to strengthen for every year 9, year 10, year 11 currently in mainstream and special education across the city. So employer engagement, next slide, is a bit of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it's something that central government always wants to do. It's something that breaking down barriers recognises as key. How we, in a concrete, appropriate sense, get employers into the world of educators, into schools, and giving young people that really direct experience of the real world of work. And so again, just a useful little statistic: 83% of those 108 schools annually make sure all the young people have that thing that many would call work experience. It's sometimes framed and structured differently as people try and design out some of the problems with work experience. But here I've got examples from Waverley School, from Hornsey Green School. That's we must be getting the right patch for a couple of secondary schools that can illustrate the hundreds, thousands of hours that they are achieving in terms of getting young people into the workplace. Let's go on to the next slide. This is absolutely one that you will recognise as key. And this is an example from King's Boys School down in South of the city, where the transition skills that young people need as they move into the next phase of further education, higher education, or into employment, all about CV writing, application forms, covering letters, dealing with psychometric testing and personality stuff. So what you're seeing here is some resource that has been developed between employers and King's Boys School. This is the sort of thing, again, we're promoting across all those schools in the hub to prepare young people for those transitions. I said in my introduction, that next slide, sorry, that we have always wanted to take a sector approach, getting the real understanding of the direction of travel for a particular sector. And you'll see towards the end of the presentation an absolute focus on skills, preparing people for the unknown workforce, the growing world of work that isn't the one that parents and grandparents were part of, but is one that our young people are going to be part of. And so here's an illustration of a very particular vocational skills day, which might mean that this is for young people who we know are going to thrive so well in the top academic kind of streams. And so this is from 9 Stars, big mainstream school in Acox Green, and then the Edge Alternative Provision School. We have 6 alternative provision schools that are full-time, serious proper schools that we're engaged with, that are taking young people who would otherwise be excluded or at risk of exclusion because they are failing or vulnerably expecting to fail in the mainstream. And the further we get into the work that matters most to us, and the work that's really implicated most strongly through breaking down barriers, is everything that we do that's targeted around those most vulnerable people who are likely to be those who don't need them. And so this is an example of one of those days where working with the engineering manufacturing sector, we've got examples of young people doing work around coding and testing in kind of interesting areas of technology as well as traditional kind of construction skills. Interestingly, that same group of young people, next slide, those who are most switched off education often have got incredible strengths in entrepreneurial kind of thinking and behaviour, and it's something that really sets people alight, turns people on. And so again, some of the work that we've done with the Reach Free School in King's Heath, Edge in King's Norton, Jewellery Water right in the Central School, Core Academy in Holyhead, and the special schools as well, Selly in Oscott Manor, really looking at very specific vocational skills in the context of small to medium-sized employers and startups, and fueling the excitement of what's possible in the entrepreneurial kind of skills of the young person. it's an area where it's really easy to find great stories to share. What I want to do though is kind of reassure you what we're not trying to do is put a gloss and say it's all sorted. When you get into the City of Birmingham School, where our student young people are, where you have 6 free schools, you see young people who are a long way off being employable and ready for the world of work. And so it does take a considerable amount of time and resource and method and systematic approaches. What's interesting is that when Oscar go and look at some of these settings, they see the very best in terms of careers and world work plans, schemes, and activities going on. So, whilst there is a huge need, and we're driven by some of the negative numbers that mean we know how much there is to do, part of it is that some of the people who are working in those spaces are doing what is best, even though the outcomes are still challenging. When I say best, I mean best by national comparison, as well as best across the city. Do you want to say, Ruth, I feel like my next slide, my voice has gone on. Do you want to say something about the UTCs? Because I know really that what Dan has led there has been a bit special. Do you want to speak to this slide?
Yeah, so this is an example of really the heart of what we do. So we partner employers with all of our institutions so that they can obviously access that skills pipeline, but also develop it and ensure that the schools that they're working with understand the needs that young people are going to have to come out with at the end. So this is Jacobs, which is obviously a massive employer in Birmingham and across the country. Dan Hickman at the end of the photo, he's one of our cornerstone employers and he's also an enterprise advisor. So he works really closely with the school and all sorts of outcomes have come out of that. They've developed work experience. They've got a really successful graduate apprenticeship program, and they've they've helped them to develop their sort of they were sort of front runners in terms of developing the T levels, and a lot of these young people that they're working with are actually going into Jacobs and getting a job because it's almost like a seamless kind of progression for them. Dan's really sort of involved in terms of the strategy of the school and what they need to be doing to develop, for those sort of like high tech jobs in the future. So. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, it's worth saying as well that, I know 14 to 19 institutions have a really hard time because when young people transition to a new setting at age 14, relief that good speakers come. So I've spent years only seeing Jenny on a screen, so it's really exciting to actually sit next to them. So what's interesting is that for schools that transition at 14, happy, stable children stay in their school. A lot of the children who transition are children that the school are quite happy to shove out the door. Exactly. Because in Birmingham, it isn't a natural time to leave your school at 14. So actually, whilst the Engineering Academy, UTC, on the Aston University Park, is really high tech and looks very busy, it has a lot of challenge that comes in through the front door. So what they do in this sort of space and the outcomes they get are really quite special. They're quite something to celebrate. There are some UTCs across the country that have really bombed and failed, and we're lucky to have one that's been a real success and is succeeding with young people who need it most.
Tim, I was just going to say,
we're out of time.
I'm just conscious of time.
Okay.
Just you to sort of
I will wrap up. I'll wrap up very easily, which is by saying that all the remaining slides in the slide deck, again, illustrated from a fantastic range of schools, are talking to the point about our preoccupation with delivering skills for the future. So sustainability, high tech, robotics, things, digital things that the picture of the economy for the future needs, work with HS2, and we finally finished in the slide deck with a little bit about what we do with special schools for our most vulnerable. So slides 2 to 17, all about skills for the future, and then we are proudest of a lot of what we do for our most vulnerable young people, which we very happily take kind of questions on. But if I can leave you with kind of the gaps and benchmarks and the work for careers team being set from a London agenda, but actually when you go through the Breaking Down Barriers report, they absolutely speak to that. They match very, very, very well. So we thought it was appropriate to talk through our kind of gatsby driven priorities in answer to your Breaking Down Barriers kind of question. Enough content, really well.
Thank you very much, Tim. So I'm going to, I've got a few questions, but I'm going to open it to colleagues first. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Iron?
Thank you. That was great. I've been a secondary school teacher in Birmingham for 15 years, and my experience of careers is that it's very bitty, not connected, like random days or hours. Each school doing different things. There's no coordinated approach. There's no strategy. There's no everyone getting the advice and opportunities. It's just individuals in schools getting this, individuals in school getting this. Whereas the coordinated approach so that every child in Birmingham is getting, really decent careers advice and opportunities, and
absolutely spot on. Agree completely, and it sits with my opening point about the fact that it's not what schools are driven by. If Ofsted judged schools and head teachers' salaries were set by how good their careers plan was, or where all the young people ended up in terms of destinations that were the best for them, then schools would behave differently. The reality is that heads aren't driven by that as their number one matrix, by the number one measure. And central government has been quite happy with the dismantling of the tools that enable us to say thou shalt. And so we're left in the role of being influencers. The good news is that we have the team that we've got, strength and connection with employers, and 108 schools engaged. If you were to say what's the weak point of that model is, that doesn't mean 108 head teachers and principals engaged. It means a bunch of careers leads who are passionate. And if I get my careers team together with those careers leads, you'd think the world was wonderful. But what you just described in school is the reality. So if we still challenge at the moment, but as a head teacher, I'd own that reality. Because the reality is, when I was a head, I was thrilled with what we did for work experience and thrilled with some of the great experiences we had. Is it the same across all schools? Is it a guarantee? Is it enough? Is it consistent? No. And the other weakness is that so much is dependent. If you look at the total amount of resource in this and what we're trying to deliver with the resource that we've got, an awful lot is dependent on what employers give. What employers give and who they free up and the quality of what they give isn't a walk in the park either. So we spend quite a lot of time trying to gatekeep and curate the good stuff.
I would also add, though, that actually you have hit the nail on the head, and actually a lot of what we do and a lot of the time that we spend with the careers leader in school, which is hopefully an assistant head or should be at that SLT level, is exactly that, is to have a strategic careers programme in place so that it's absolutely working towards, the priorities of the school in terms of their school improvement, but also the outcomes for their young people. So it is there. It is part of absolutely core to what we do. But for all the reasons that Tim's talked about, that can sometimes take time. So you've got a whole spectrum of institutions. Some that will very much do have that strategic approach to careers, whereas you'll have some that have maybe just come into the hub or, resourced or whatever, and now they're working, they're at the beginning of that journey. So you're right, but it is absolutely a core part of what we do in terms of supporting school.
I mean, just by way of illustration, Jenny and I worked together on early help. And one of the things that, again, the way that was set up is we want all of those partners to maximise their impact in Birmingham schools. We have just the same problem. There are some schools that are great, some aren't. The advantage is that BEP has been set up to deal with heads and to deal with the stuff they're most interested in, which is results and Ofsted, which means that if they're failing in Jenny's world or they're failing in Ruth's world, then actually we do have a bit of clout to go and knock some heads together and challenge them or draw them in or whatever, which is kind of what we do.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you. It's really, really interesting, and I'm very, very interested in the last slide that you've got, your skills for employees and how you get employees working with you, and the fact that you, I wondered how you get the people, the business volunteers, because my daughter's ended up with a business, and she would struggle to all of the time spent running the business.
Yeah.
How do you get good businesses to get involved with? Because it goes on to really the apprenticeships and the fact that we're struggling to get young people to take up apprenticeships. And again, that goes to, especially the small businesses.
Yeah.
They need a lot of support in order to be able to actually take on an apprentice. So how do we improve that? How do we assist the businesses? And my last one as well, increasing the kudos and the value of a vocational, going down that rather than go through university, because I think we still have this sort of feeling in this country that's not a career path, and actually it is, and we should be increasing that value and seeing people's skills as important as educational skills.
Brilliant questions again. Do you want to do that? How we engage employers?
So we engage in a whole range of employers, and what we've done recently to get those volunteers. So we go to our cornerstone employers who bring people from their workforce. We work really closely with the Chamber of Commerce over the summer to actually help them to get the message out to their small businesses. That this is something that they can engage with and help to, it's an opportunity for them to develop their
They
skills.
don't have many small businesses, so their fees to join the Chamber of Commerce is quite high.
Yeah. So we have a different makeup of employees that are involved, and the smallest percentage is the small to medium sized enterprises, because exactly for the reason you said, they don't have the capacity and resources to put that time. So we are developing that as a strategy for next year. We've identified that we do actually want to support them more to get involved with the careers that we miss on the agenda. So it is important. We do have a whole range of different. In terms of the technical weeks, then so it is actually a really legal requirement now. All schools and schools to make sure that all of their students are learning about apprenticeship and technical routes from year 8. So that's literally just come into law in this January, just beginning of this year. Previously to that, there was a basic law, so schools are actually have to let technical providers into their school to meet the students. So they learning about those different routes, and that's ramped up now with the new provider access legislation. So we've done a lot of work with schools to make sure that the careers advising guidance that they're offering is impartial and it covers every single option that's available to the students. So we've been doing that for the simple section of the careers hub, and that's actually starting now to have an impact in terms of apprenticeship take-ups. I think that's trebled this year, and actually 94% of students reporting that they do understand the different options. There's just a bit of a barrier with take-up, which is something that we are actually doing some research in at the moment to understand, what the advantages are in terms of take-up. But that is, it is another core part of what we do, is making sure every school is offering that independent and impartial side.
And the vocational academic split, in the 36 years that I've been a teacher, there has been endless government failure in trying to bring valid, TDI, GMBQ diplomas. There are T levels now. T levels are a disaster. they're disastrous because they're trying to make them really academic to give them the status, which doesn't work, as vocational degrees. But in a way, there are two things I'd say that are positive. That's why really getting systematically into school. So your question about it being systematic and giving young people experiences, if you get a 12, 13, 14-year-old listening to 16, 17-year-old saying, or 23-year-old, I went to university to waste time, and actually this was a career route that worked, and this is, I think that's really powerful. And I do think that, to compare with when I was ahead, that what the careers team is offering is more structured, more organised. So I going back to that opening conversation. The other thing to say is that actually the pandemic has been a huge interruption to the sense that universities are panacea. It's been awful, and I think that disruption gives us a little bit of an opportunity, because young people are not on a sense of the world is straightforward, tramlines, it's all wonderful. One of the big challenges we've got in Birmingham is the extent to which different communities have got very, very fixed ideas about career routes and what their experiences are and what they believe to be accessible and worth investing in. So the need for huge long-term, to get earlier, to work with younger children, to work with parents more into the community is massive, as you can see.
Thank you. Councillor Aziz?
Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting. I was just looking at the level 2 attainment graph that you were just posting. And it's great to see Birmingham is just in line with the Cs. I was just looking, we're still significantly lower than national the country. And I don't know how much it reflects the most deprived sides of Birmingham, such as East Birmingham, we are that side. So I don't know, because that's the most deprived side. So I'm just wondering how we get involved with them and what marketings and communication skills you're using to get involved with young people there. Because as you were saying before, I think in some sides of East Birmingham, people are set on one idea, not on the education and the university. That's the only success. So just wondering how we get involved in them. Because there's a lot of programs, there's great programs running, but the issue is there's a lot of young people don't know they're running or don't have access, or we're still sometimes stuck in 10 years ago, where a lot of people have moved on since we get everything. So I'm just wondering about that.
So there are lots and lots of ways to cut this data, and that's kind of my day job, and I could spend hours answering your question. It's true to say that if we're talking about your patch, if we're talking about East Birmingham, that achievement in the Pakistani community, achievement in the Bangladeshi community has really increased at a higher rate than it has in white working class community or in Black African Caribbean communities. So there is a good news story who's taken the population that I think you're talking about in East Birmingham to say that progress and attainment are increasing. And it's worth saying that this slide that I showed is the hard slide. It's attainment. It's what they actually get. If you look at how far they come, the young people who've done really poorly in primary years, maybe with a lot more language deficit, maybe lots more catching up, maybe lots that's not going well, actually, the story in Birmingham is better than national in terms of progress. So it's worth understanding the information well enough so that we give credit where credit's due. So there's a great story to tell about education in Birmingham. What you're describing is what I think I was talking about in terms of there is so much more to do to get inside communities and to recognise that communities think and behave differently. So the patterns of underachievement and people not accessing, not getting what they need in Weedy Castle or Northfield is about young people who think the only route in life is to have a white lamp and to have be self-employed tradesman. And there are heads who struggle with how deep that belief is in families and young people. If we go into, Hodge Hill, Wolseley Green, Small League, it's a different set of givens. But going back to your point, that's why we need a really systematic plan. And actually, it needs to go earlier. It needs to be with parents and small children earlier, with successful role models coming in and saying, it worked for me, you can do it, this route is accessible. And the more we do that, I mean, the good news is that if you get it through a 40-year lens, the Pakistani community in East London has changed so much, has achieved so much. It's how we make that systematic and universal is the challenge.
Thank you. Councillor.
How do we make sure that the views and opinions of young people that go through careers get taken into account when building programs moving forward? And my other question would be, I know you touched on special school, but how do we make sure that careers advice is inclusive for children that might be neurodivergent in mainstream school?
That's that last question is a really important and hard one. Can you do the first one, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're, because of this comparative capacity at the end of the day, we have spent a lot of time offering our universal approach, but we are really keen to get more youth voice into what it is that we're doing, and that it's actually, our strategy is shaped by the young people. We ran a really good project last year with 2 alternative provisions, and we learned a lot from them as young people, and that's shaped a lot of now what we're doing with alternative provisions and advantage young people. We also have a group of young SEND ambassadors, so they've really helped us to shape our strategy, but also they've met with our employers, and that's really sort of been a real catalyst for employers, quite large employers, to understand, what they can do more to be more inclusive, and not just in their sort of career development, but actually in employment. So the slide at the end, HS2, they've absolutely flown with, but that what they're doing now with young people with special needs, but actually that came from us and from my team. Recruiting these SEND ambassadors and bringing them into the work that we do, and that's had an amazing effect actually on a lot of people. But so we're doing another project this year, which is with mainstream young people, post 16, vulnerable young people with social emotional health difficulties, or it depends what you mean by SEND. So SEND is a broader way of SEND, but we've got young people that have, suffered bereavement and loss through COVID. We're supporting them with this project, and it's very much about them kind of shaping the sort of careers guidance that they need from employers. So it's very much working hand in glove with employers as well. So the employers are starting to learn from those young people. But again, there's a massive amount of work to do, because employers do find it really difficult to understand their different people to do people. So it's part of our ongoing work. And next year we will be having a youth voice strategy which is inclusive and make sure that it's feeding into our.
You touched on, we've touched here on all the big problems. The big problems are that it's not high enough up the agenda, therefore it's not systematic enough. We've got a culture that says vocational isn't as good as academic. We've got discrete communities with very particular kind of patterns and understandings. And the last huge issue for Birmingham is acute meeting SEND, and a national issue is that increasing complexity of neurodivergence, which means that we've got a lot of young people who can't cope with the bog standard, and if they can't cope with the bog standard in school, how are they going to cope with the bog standard in the workplace? And to some extent, whilst I wouldn't want to dodge any, all of your questions have been challenging, excellent, and appropriate. There's also an art to knowing, when you've got your key resource here, what can we hold them responsible for, what can we not? I would say that we've got a real focus. If you compare what we're doing in Birmingham with the national kind of picture, some of our greatest strengths are in SEND and inclusion, and it's been what we've prioritised. So it's an inevitable priority for Birmingham, where there's really acute need, but we are nowhere near having enough resource to and the problem is much bigger and it's going to be solved in this space.
Thank you. And just one final question that's from myself, just to kind of wrap up. If you could suggest 3 recommendations that you'd like to see the scrutiny report particularly skills and employment for young people in Birmingham, what would they be?
I think the first would be to always encourage that we build on strengths that we've got. That we're at a time where the needs can feel overwhelming, and where people look at things being broken or things that aren't good enough, and people want to come and make a mark. The art of being effective in Birmingham is to have a good understanding of the complex issues that you just articulated, but to build sensibly on what we've got and what our strengths are. So I think that we have, over the last 6-7 years in BEC, we've really grown and strengthened. One of our problems is that the team we work with inside PCC is always changing. Too many senior officers change. And so what we long for is kind of continuity. And so we want closer join-up between the key parts, and we want that to be a kind of a mature growing, not a knee-jerk reaction and shooting off in a new direction. That would be kind of recommendation number one. Recommendation number two for me would be recognising the significance of very different needs in different communities, different places, and being able to kind of target appropriately. And that involves, when you look at what those needs are, that involves getting earlier up the age range and working with children and families younger if you get inside communities, because community attitudes need to change a lot.
Can I add a third?
Well, two, so number two, go on.
The third one for me would be to not reinvent the wheel, so and not break up the landscape even further, because that's one of the difficult, big problem for young people is that it's such fragmented. The careers advice and guidance that they get as they move through their young adulthood, it is fragmented. And in terms of the Breaking Down Barriers report, recommendation 8 is something that we do. So we are already doing that. Birmingham Careers Hub do that. So don't reinvent the wheel. Don't start doing different things. Don't start adding. Let's just join up and really look at what is happening and continue to fund that rather than using taxpayer money to create more fragmented services.
Thank you very much, sir.
One question and one asking information really. So I think you've answered the question, but I just want to clarify from Beth. You work with schools rather than being the direct careers provider, to actually provide the advice for young people. So you work with schools leads to make those connections.
That's really important, because that's kind of what's in our answers when we're saying join things up, don't reinvent the wheel. Actually, and my point about to Councillor Brennan's question is, we can't change the things that we can't change, knowing what we can change. We can't instantly create the kind of uniformity and strategic consistency that you were kind of saying, well, where is it? But we've got to get there incrementally. And that's, it's the right thing to aim for. But nobody would be foolish to produce a report that thinks that you've got magic wands to do things that you haven't got a gift for.
And so just one of the things that I'm conscious that I have been able to provide for members on the Task and Finish group is actually a list of qualifications that are available, not the subjects, but the types of qualifications and levels that are available to people. I've done just some Google research and I can't find that in one place. Is that some information that you could circulate to members?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a real, I was thinking as it goes back to my point to Councillor Aziz that communities have got different needs. For anybody here who's ever been a parent to a teenager or a now young adult, what a nightmare! What a messy, complex. For those of us with loads of skills and expertise in the area, it's still a nightmare. And so how we create clarity, is really important, because the traditional routes of A-level and university degree employment are increasingly irrelevant. I've got capable, bright graduate children who, it's really difficult. And it's, you know, it's how we give people the skills to navigate an uncertain world is often. But we'll get qualifications.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you, Jim and Louise. That's been really useful today. We've probably got loads of more questions, but we've run out of time, but that's been really, really useful. Sorry, did you? Oh, yeah.
We'd love to say anything.
No question.
Hello. Right, I'll pass over to Jenny.
Thank you. Would you mind if I just move over there, because then I can see people? I've been
Yeah,
I've got a picture. Is that all right? I think I'll be able to address you a little bit better if you can see me. Thank you. Glad to see you on. Okay, well, thank you. That would be really helpful if you'd like to put that up. It is a written presentation and I will be referring to it. Thank you everybody for providing me with the opportunity to come and talk to this committee. I'm looking today and talking about current and future employment opportunities for care leavers of Birmingham. So I'll start by saying we are very proud of the work that we in the city do with our care leavers in Birmingham and support them. There's always more to do, as you've probably read from the report. I'm taking it that you've seen the report. Yes, okay. So what I'll do is I'll just try and run through the sort of more personal points, and then that will give us more time for any questions and answers. And I should say, I haven't met the majority of you before, so it's good to meet you all. And I'm Jenny Turnoff, and I'm the director for the recording and the director of practice in Birmingham Children's Trust. That means that I'm responsible for all of the social care and social work function in the trust, right from early help, right through to adoption and care leavers. So that's me, and I've been here for about 4.5 years now. So I'm really surprised that I haven't met you previously. Okay, so I'll just run us through. So currently we are supporting just under 1,000 care leavers in Birmingham. The numbers that we provided to you in the document today really focus on young people aged 18 to 22. However, we can support care leavers up to the age of 25, and that particularly when they are attending university, or indeed if they come back to us and they ask for help, because let's remember we are these young people's corporate parents, we are their parents, and just like me and my children, even at 25 we continue to come back asking for help and assistance, and we need to apply that principle to our care leavers because they are our children. I think what's really important is to let you know that there is going to be a new judgment, a standalone judgment in the Ofsted inspection framework for the support that local authorities and partners provide to care leavers. Back in the SIF days, the single inspection framework days, there was a standalone judgment that was very much targeted around the outcomes for care leavers. The ILACS framework, which I will admit I am one of the authors of from my previous time in Ofsted, really looks at care leavers across the whole children in care experience. So a decision has been made now that would be reverting back to the single judgment, and that's really welcomed, because what that does, that provides a real focus, doesn't it, on what we are doing to support care leavers. And really, there's going to be a huge focus in the new framework around education, employment and training outcomes for children, for care leavers. I expect, as the training is being completed today, with Ofsted, inspected the new judgment, and we are anticipating an ILACS inspection of Birmingham shortly. We might be one of the first local authorities to be inspected under this new framework, so that is notable and of interest. So in terms of our numbers, 62% of our care leavers age 18 to 21 are in employment, education or training. Now, what that means then, of course, is that there is a sizable number of young people who are not in education, employment and training. We perform better than statistical neighbours at 55% and also the England average. But my message really to all of you today is that whilst Ofsted will come and they will say your performance is good in this area, and it is good in this area, for me, as a corporate parent, and I'm certainly sure for you, it's not good enough and we want to be better. Now, what the report does do, it does provide you a breakdown of some of the young people aged between 18 and 21 who are unable to engage at the moment in employment, training and education. And this is a really important matter and it's complex. And I guess really there are some sort of value judgments for us to make there. So whilst there's a really clear definition that has been provided by the Department for Education around what means a young person can't be employed in education, employment and training. From a sort of a parental point of view, we want to really encourage young people to be able to get into the space where they are able. So, for example, we have got 8.3%, so that's 83 young people currently who are either really poorly, and some of those young people are in hospital because they've got very serious illnesses or mental illnesses, disability. So it was really interesting to hear the earlier conversation around SEND children and inclusion for those children, and because they are parents of very young children. But actually, society today, you can be a parent of a very young child, and you can also be engaged in employment, education, and training. Can you? I got a live example today. So there's something about sort of us challenging as parents some of the thinking really behind that. But actually, we've got 255 children out of that cohort of nearly 1,000 who are classed by the DWP and the DFE as economically inactive. Now, in the Trust and across the wider council and with our partners, we are very proud to be relationship-based in our practice. And when we talk about young people being economically inactive, it really grinds, doesn't it? It feels uncomfortable. So certainly in our care leaver service, we are putting a lot of effort into really addressing what that means for young people. And we do understand in terms of young people being able to emotionally, psychologically connect to employment, education and training, they do need to be in space where they are able. And we are dealing with a number of young people who have got really quite severe trauma needs. And again, that's really hard. Back in June, we actually asked Ofsted to come in and take a little peek at our care leaver service. We did that as a favour to Ofsted because they were looking at writing a new judgment criteria for care leavers, and we said, can we come and test out what we think our new judgments might look like in Birmingham? I have to say, nobody else in the country wanted to do it. So we were very brave because we opened our shop up and said, come and have a look at the work that we're doing. And we had a really big conversation with Ofsted about the impact of our current care leavers of years of inadequate children's services. Because these are the children, so there are legacy issues here. These are some of the children who, when services were inadequate, they lived through those services, that was their experience. So what we're dealing with now is not only the trauma of being removed from your family, of being a child who, there's obviously there are attachment issues, etc., but also do these young people get good enough services? And a lot of the work that we're doing in the trust now is actually almost publicly apologising to those young people and trying to do right for them and do more for them. So that's the sort of the context really, and we are really ambitious for our young people to be better, do better in this space. So there are a number of initiatives, if you want to just page slightly down, and I'm going to whisk over them. So, during lockdown, we made an absolute effort to make sure that all of our young people in education, actually, so not just our co-leavers, had access to laptops, the ability to work remotely through broadband, and that has continued. Something like 4,500 laptops were provided to us by the DFE and also to schools, and we made sure that our most vulnerable young people, children in care and co-leavers receive those. We do receive a lot of late entries to care, 17-year-olds actually, and many of them are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We are a huge importer of those children. Over the last 4 months, I think we've accommodated to date about 54 children into our care. And of course, they will become care leavers. And actually are very aspirational, which is very positive. Many of those young people go to university. So in terms of making sure that everybody, in terms of the co-leavers offer, has got same access to the same levels of support. Everybody has access to their own laptop and broadband, which is funded communication. And we are using the Household Support Fund also to support that even further. So in terms of relationship based and getting things done, obviously we employ personal advisors in the trust to work directly with children and young people. And some of those personal advisors, they're doing a lot of work around helping young people around gaining self-confidence, being socially connected, attending groups, activities, being part of the community, because we know that this creates, better conditions for learning and engagement. And also, we actually do really celebrate each achievement with our young people when they do well. And also, we do a lot of work around working with other agencies such as CGL, which is, I always get the title wrong, Caring Growing Lives, which is actually a company, a private organisation who support young people, whether they're addiction and adults, but actually they're doing a lot of work with us. Youth Employment Coach through the DWP, Black Country Impact and other support services across the system. So there's a whole team effort. In terms of careers advice, they're really interesting. So just moving down to support from each manager. As you can see there, we do have one-to-one sessions with all of our co-leavers over and above the usual universal offer. So please do let's remember that our co-leavers are still part of society. They do access all universal services, school, college, and all of the things that I'm sure Tim and Ruth were discussing earlier. And very much this is additional, so dedicated one-to-one sessions with our young people and lots of face-to-face contact. And you can see we've delivered hundreds and hundreds, if you just page down, of career conversations with our young people. So we're very, very active in this space. And some of our young people, some of our PAs are specifically trained as EAT workers. So they, we've got that's their responsibility to work with those young people. So moving on then, we do have a lot of co-leaders conferences where we bring lots of young people together. The most recent conference that we held a few months ago was very, very well attended by co-leaders, but also by a number of, as you can see here, a number of providers. And there are some absolutely brilliant offers for young people who are not accessing anything at the moment. So I'll give you a really good example. The NHS, literally, we're sat there talking to our young people in one-to-ones, and our young people were talking about their needs, their aspirations, their interests. And amazingly, the NHS now are in a space where they receive information from the young person, and rather than matching the young person to a vacancy, a job, they actually create roles that will meet that young person's needs in terms of apprenticeships. That really works for our care leaders. And also, they've got a really good sort of emotional support offer as well. So they were oversubscribed, you know. So there's definitely something around, whilst I was listening to Tim earlier on talking about sort of academic routes, for our young people, we've got some really academic young people, but we're very open to supporting our young people into many ways of employment and learning. So moving on, and you're doing really well keeping up with me on this, you're doing really well. We do, again, we do it, there's a lot of work around supporting young people financially and also with their accommodation, because we know that these two areas, along with emotional well-being as well, need to be really in sync and intact for young people to be in a space where they can learn. So I just wanted to assure you that we are working really closely with a number of, with Birmingham City Council Housing. There is a co-leaders team, so we've got dedicated workers there. With a pre-tenancy team in the council. With St Basil's, who I'm sure you all know, who are just absolutely fabulous. We work very closely with them, very targeted work. And with Barclays Life Skills, so Barclays Bank, who are a big contributor actually to the trust through their corporate parenting work. They offer a lot to our younger people. So there are a lot of opportunities for our young people in this space. And you'll see, you can just whiz through this, but these are just some of the numbers really of some of the conferences and events and sign-ups. So on the 26th of October, for example, we had 70 young people linked to some sort of employment engagement and training. A huge success story, and this is something for us all to celebrate, is the number of our young people who are at university doing some absolutely fabulous courses. We've got barristers, we've got a lot of social workers, I have to say, we've got a lot of teachers, but we've got people doing some really specific work. We've got somebody who's, as you can see, Year 4 research PhD at Wolverhampton, doing a really publishing, some really, sophisticated work, I have to say. And you'll see as we just page down, again, just a whole number, and show the variety of intake. So the bottom line is that we've currently got 137 children, young people rather, at university. That's 18% of our population who are EAT. And that's remarkable. The national average is 6%. So that's something to really focus on. A high number of those young people, as I said earlier, are out on the company side seeking young people, and they receive a lot of support from us. They come from very traumatised backgrounds, many that have fled some terrible circumstances, do not speak English. We're working with about 162 languages, but in saying that, they are real learners, and it's amazing actually seeing them, seeing what they've been through and seeing what they achieve is remarkable. So if you just page down ever so slightly. So we do support young people when they are at university, and when young people, what's really interesting for care leaders is, and I don't know if you know this, and it's not that many years ago that I found this out, but the local authority, the trust, we pay all of the fees for university, 100% for young people. So there's no help in that sense. And of course, many of our young people, they go off to university all over the country, some go abroad, they need to be able to come back. So we've got a lot of stay put arrangements where our young people remain with their foster carers, and we pay all of the fees for accommodation, everything actually. So it's a huge cost to the council, but, you know, these are our young people of the future, aren't they? And we must invest in them. I should mention the Brooks Scholarship Fund. Many of you will be aware of Eve Brooks, who was, of course, an elected member, a politician, and we work really closely with them. My director colleague, David Stringfellow, he's one of the directors for the board. There was a meeting this week. They do some great work with our young people. They really genuinely care. They don't need to do it. They continue doing the work. And as you can see, they've raised over £400,000 that they've awarded to over 300 of our care leaders. But let me be clear, when I meet with them, I said to them, you know, we really appreciate what you do, but it is additional, because we've got to make sure that we, you know, we support our young people in our own right. So that's great. Some really good outcomes around care leaver apprenticeships as well. In the trust, we've got, I think actually today we've got 16 care leaver apprentices. Now, what we do in the trust, we don't do this any wider in the trust, and I guess really you asked me what are the 3 things that we would want to see. Currently in the trust, when we have a vacancy that's a non-professional, non-social work vacancy, so to speak, we do an assessment as to whether or not that role could be filled by an apprentice. Now, obviously, these are usually our lower graded roles, like our grade 2s, our grade 3s, and we have to sign off through an HR process that it wouldn't be appropriate as an apprenticeship opportunity. And that's a position that we've taken. We would probably ask that you consider that position wider across the council, because, you know, these are these children and young people are our future, aren't they? And they're doing very well, by the way. The other thing to say is that when we do have apprenticeships and they're doing 57 level 2, many of them, and other associated qualifications, we do guarantee them a job at the end. So they don't just go through an apprenticeship and then go and crack on. Some of them have gone off and done other things. We've had a number of our young people who have ended up working in schools as teaching assistants, which is great, following their apprenticeship, or actually in the business function side of schools, in the office. Doing really well. And we are working, as you can see, we keep going down a little bit more, with a number of other providers. We've got health again, we've got some local businesses providing apprenticeships, and they are identifying and saying care leavers from Birmingham first. They are always receive an interview. That's just a given. So I'm just going to move really quickly on now because I'm conscious of time. So if the Youth Promise Plus through the European Fund, another really good project with 4 full-time intervention workers employed by Change for Our Lives to really work with perhaps some of our most needy young people where there have been drug dependency, substance misuse issues in the past, doing really well. The Kickstart programme with the DWP, and if I've just moved through, you've seen all this. I guess what I'm demonstrating to you is that we're trying to be really far-reaching, working with SENAR, which, of course, as you will appreciate, there have been some challenges because of some of the sort of churn in that part of the system, but that does feel like we've made some better connections of late, supporting education, health and care plans, really getting in there as soon as possible. And as I said earlier, you know, we've got a number of arrangements from a number of providers. As you can see, if you moved on to 6.3, 6.3, 6.4, you can see all of the offers where young people are moving on. John Lewis Partnership, by the way, I don't know if people saw the advert over Christmas around Curly, but children in care. John Lewis Partnership have come to Birmingham and said, you're our preferred project, children in care and care leavers in Birmingham, so that's great as well. And then I'm going to keep going, right down past 8. So the ask really to support the agenda. So on page 47, so if you just go down a little bit further. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah. So really just to sum up, high think that we are absolutely, as a trust and with our partners and with the council, doing everything that we can to do the best by our young people. But there's always more that we can do. We want those numbers to be better. We want young people's achievements to be more. We are working with Birmingham City Council and our partners. We do want to create a bespoke drop-in centre. Now, Shank, my head of service for Curly, has written this down. That's been agreed. That will be happening. But if ever anybody can help us to sort of find a day somewhere for our young people to be, because that's really important to have a sense of identity. We're all the things I've talked about around confidence, around being part of the community, that they can access those things. So that's really important. Shank always asks this question around free bus travel. Yesterday, of course, there was a motion today, wasn't there? Very closely connected. But actually, this is really tricky because 39% of our co-leaders do not live in Birmingham. They live outside of Birmingham. So if everybody lived in Birmingham, it would be so much easier. Oh, this is lovely. But thinking about what that might mean, affordable childcare, that's another challenge for our mothers and fathers who've got young children who want to come back into work. We would really ask, we would really love a guaranteed curly interview with any of those that come up. You know, you're a curly, you're getting an interview, and we're going to, because actually, even if you're not successful, you've got the opportunity to be interviewed, to get feedback and learn. And BBC, Birmingham City Council rather, to offer ring-fence work experiences, apprenticeships and opportunities to our co-leaders. We're a massive business. This is the family business. This is who we are. And these are our children. So it's to me, it should be a given. We're obviously going to throw in there around affordable supported accommodation. And we know that that's a really challenging point. Graduate internships, ring-fence for co-leaders, English and Maths post year 13, passport core requirement. Is there any funding that we can look at for one-to-one support from partners? And that's something for us to consider. And then funded learning assistance technology such as voice recognition software. So these are really things that we think we could do a lot more of. And the only last thing I want to say, and that's my presentation over and open to question, is yesterday I noticed that Nottinghamshire Council, full council yesterday, swore in and agreed that co-leaders in the Shire would be known as having protected characteristics. And that's something that we are going to be talking to our lead member about and other members here, because we believe that, and this is happening now across the country, if you are a care experienced person, this is a protected characteristic. And this would really make a difference, I think, for our care leaders, because we're actually saying, you know, you've been through adversity, you've had to contend with major issues in your life, and we are going to put you into a space where we will really advocate for you and put you at the centre of our thinking. They are our children. So thank you for that. I hope that all is clear.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I'm going to open up for questions now. So, if you've got any questions,
That's absolutely amazing. I think it's incredible what you're doing for our caregivers, and thank the team and everybody. I wish every child got this amount of support, you know, make a difference to everyone, I'm sure. I wanted to ask, I think, especially the one-to-one careers conversations, I'm sure that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the young people who are in employment, to talk about the young people who are in universities. I'm sure it's going to be a big range, but the ones who are in employment, I'm just concerned about what type of jobs class as employment. Like, are there people on 0 hours contracts or not very secure work, or, you know, and what I would see as a good job, you know, a career type job, rather than something that isn't that. So I wanted to ask about that. And then in terms of the young people who are struggling to, that aren't working for all the different reasons that you discussed, what have you found are like the best sort of early foundation jobs to get, just for these young people who are struggling to sort of take the first step into work and see how it goes for them?
Okay, so the first question, I mean, we've got a real wide range of young people who are in, you know, so many different roles. The vast majority of our young people, because of their age, they are in sort of apprenticeship type roles. And it's still in learning roles really, because we're sort of really focusing on our sort of 18 to 21 year olds in this conversation. So I'm not aware that we've got any young people, but I can check that out who are on the, you know, those 0-hour contracts who were, you know, picked up and dropped. When we've got young people where they are really low earners, then we do attempt to subsidise them, because obviously, as I've said earlier, that they are our children. And just because a young person is then in employment, which for some young people is a massive achievement, actually, getting up every day and being in a routine is a major positive. We're still having the conversations about, well, this isn't the end game for you, you know, a little bit like my own children, you know, they start here and hopefully they'll end up there, you know, but it's an iterative process, isn't it? So in truth, a real mix, a real variety. A number of young people are doing amazing things. We've got young people who are working on cruise ships, you know, as part of the entertainment team. We've got young people who are in really vocational roles, but doing very, very well, hairdressing, bricklaying, all those sorts of things. And then we've got young people who are in more sort of academic, you know, working in banks, you know, libraries, you know, all those sorts of things. I think what would be interesting, I can't answer the question now. I personally will be really interested in how many of those young people have moved into public services, actually, you know, into things like what we do, working for councils, etc. But also, you know, police, fire, all of those things. That'll be interesting. So I'm going to take an action for myself to understand that in a little bit more detail. Your second question, what's your second question? Sorry.
About what you found to be like the good early step jobs for people who haven't worried about working and or struggling.
We've got a number of projects with sort of DWP, a number of other providers where we have sort of call-ins for young people, you know, so they'll do a lot of work around confidence building. So we have lots of sessions in that space. So looking at CVs, it's really hard, isn't it, when you're a young person, because actually you don't really have a CV, do you? You know, you come from nothing. One of my 16-year-olds the other day said, I need to send me CV, and I thought, well, what are you actually going to write? You know, so actually, one of the things that we're really proud of is we work really hard around sort of vocational activities for our young people, because one thing you can put on your CV as a young person is you've been involved in part of, you know, a group, you know, like cadets, that sort of thing, or you're a strong swimmer, or you play golf, or whatever. So there's a whole other side, isn't there, to explaining and helping young people understand that it's not all just about a job, it's about you being part of society. So there's a lot of activity in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Councillor Mills. I think
no, I'm really interested because I was only elected in May, so it's really nice to meet you and to learn much more about this. And it's something, even though like 50 years ago, I actually worked as a childcare nursery nursing for about 5 years, and then I went to the police. But having been elected, I'm I am as a corporate parent. And the responsibilities I feel there. What can I do as a counsellor to help young people in care in my ward, or who I might be prepared for, to gain those skills of employment? How can I ensure that when they leave care, they've got as many opportunities as they can, and then, yeah.
Well, the first thing you can do, you can join the corporate parenting board,
Right.
which is currently chaired by Princeton Carthy, our lead member.
Yes. Can anybody join that?
Yes, you can join that. Anybody, any elected member can join that, and we would welcome any of you, any party. It's completely neutral in that way. When you are out and about doing your business, you can always ask the question, think to yourself, what does this mean for our children in care and our care leavers? Have you considered that? So thinking again about that potential protected characteristic, and what does that mean? So for me, always having children in care and care leavers at the front of your mind, anything that goes with to conclude these meetings, so the conversation you had earlier on with Tim, what does that mean for our children? What does that, how do you address and understand what that means to our children in care and our care leavers? So just being really professionally curious actually about, I'm their parent and I'm an extension of them. We have got a reverse mentor project as well. It was very much led by Councillor Thompson, our former lead member, where we're asked lead members to actually almost champion, mentor a young person, usually a care leaver, and that's been really successful. So there are some really positive links there. We have to manage that really well because some of our care leavers are extremely, if I'm being honest, high maintenance.
Yeah.
Because of
Very challenging.
some of the things we've been through,
Yeah.
But being a champion for our children, knowing that they are our children, they are our future. So, but there's lots of things you can do, lots of things. And if you'd like to ever have a one-to-one with me, I'd be really happy to do more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brewer. Thank you, Chair. I think everything that you said has been really wonderful and interesting to listen to. I think my question would be around leavers like parents themselves.
Yes.
And what kind of support we put in place to help them maintain employment. I was a young mum myself. I have my daughter into my GCSEs.
Right.
So I understand how difficult it can be to go into training to college. And I think back when I was a young mum, we had things like Care to Learn and free bus passes, and my daughter went to nursery, which helped me go to college and then university.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think pressures on childcare and expenses and how expensive it is puts a lot of people off being able to go. So what do we do to support our care leavers to still stay in education and employment if they've got children themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the things that I've said earlier around the one-to-ones, real talking with our young people about their aspirations and considering their social environment and what's happening today, all of that's done. But we've got some really dedicated support for our young people, and that's mums and dads. So we've got a lot of group work happening in that space. When young people who are care leavers find that they're going to be parents, and sometimes it's not always fun, and sometimes it is, it can come with something of shock, trauma, secondary trauma. What is, my experience of being parented, what am I going to be like? So we do a lot of work, emotional work with young people around that. And some young people, the unborn child will have a named social worker, and we will complete a previous assessment for that. And that's not about being oppressive out of spiritual in our practice, that's about saying what's the need. So very much around support, and plans come from that, and a lot of the things you're talking about I would expect to happen. One of the points that Shank raises in this report that I've brought today, my head of service for children's care, is about considering the cost of childcare. We do have a number of apprentices who are young mums, and they work in trust for us, and we've gone all through the pregnancy and bringing them back and everything. And we've learned a lot really, because some of them really wanted to just get back to work straight away, because it was like normal and safe for them, and others were very much in a space, I really don't want to come back. But we've had to do quite a lot of financial subsidising to enable those young people to come back, for them to access childcare. We do offer childcare vouchers for all of our staff actually, so we make sure that they're involved in all of our schemes, such as Bid Up, which is our reward scheme. So we try everything financially, but the big thing is emotional. It's emotional support for our young people, and making sure that they have positive connections and support. I think there's still more to do in that space, protected characteristics, but I think for me, for me, our co-leavers becoming parents, the legislation tells us that we must work harder to support those young people than any others. So we've got to go the extra mile with them. So that's my message really to you, that they are a group of young people who we know. We do a lot of work as well with health around actually, do you really want to be a parent yet? Are you really ready to be a parent yet? And all the different means of protecting yourself with, so all that happens as well in terms of public health advice. But it's a huge area of work. Our bottom line is, we believe in trust that children, young people who become young parents have a right to be employed, educated and trained. So we do everything in our powers to maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So I'm just on your point where you mentioned about the lead member that you normally have them champion a young care leaver, and I'm just wondering whether that could be extended to other members as well, because I think we've got such a wealth of experience and caring individuals, who are members. I know I would definitely, be interested. I've worked in unemployment for over 20 years, and worked with, care leavers as well, through helping them supporting in unemployment. And I know other people have got, a wealth of skills. I mean, just in this room, we've got like so many, so much experience that I think, and I think as corporate parents, I think because we're kind of like here behind the desk almost, so to speak, we don't have that connection with them. So I think many of us should really, welcome, connecting and having like a direct, impact. If we could.
We would really appreciate that. So I will, obviously talk with Fiona and yourself after this, and we'll get something set up. Yeah,
that would be great. And just sort of one of my final statements from myself is in terms of, because I would imagine obviously which would have been through so much trauma, their confidence, compared to, I mean, it's difficult enough for children who've had what you'd call a normal sort of upbringing, but if you've been through so much trauma, your confidence is knocked back. What sort of support are care leavers sort of getting to keep their confidence up? Because sometimes I know from my experience it can be soul destroying when you're getting knocked back from jobs and training, things aren't working out the way that you expect them to. So what sort of support are care leavers getting in terms of like to help keep their confidence up and sort of mentoring them through and helping them navigate through these challenging systems?
Okay. So crudely, I think in short, we've probably got like three sort of main cohorts of care leavers. We've got care leavers who have actually, despite what they've been through previously, have lived for many years in a really settled fostering environment with their foster carers who they perceive as their family. And they've had really good education in the same school, and they've done really well. So, the relationships and the networks, the support that they receive is, great. And yes, they have care experience and they've been through a lot, but actually, all that support is there for them and all the usual things that we would expect. The other cohort of young people are those are asylum-seeking young people. Really, 180 currently young people who are 17, who are unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people approaching being care leavers. And there is more to do, I think, in that sense in terms of their emotional health and well-being and understanding the trauma that they've endured. It does sometimes feel, if I'm being honest, it does feel that it falls on the social worker and the PA I know that recently there is another task group around the emotional health and well-being of young people. There is more to do in that space, understanding trauma and responding to trauma and providing. So in short, we do everything we can. We build relationships, we work hard to support young people, we make sure that they have connections with their own communities, because that's important as well, but there's more to do in that space. The resilience is, well, I'm just in awe actually about some young people who come from where they've come from, go to university, they're a barrister by the time they're 28, it's just amazing. And then the third group are the young people who we all worry about, who are constantly on my worry list, are the young people who've been through so much trauma that they've ended up, severely self-harming, living insecure, welfare establishments, being open to defending services. They're the young people. There's a lot of support around those young people because they have a whole professional network sat around them. We've also got the preparation for adulthood team as well, the FA team, which is a service that's shared between the Trust and the Council, Children's Services and Adult Services. And that's where those young people are going to really challenge to transition into adulthood, receive additional support. And of course, as I said earlier, all of the partners that sit around those children, every child who's open to the Trust as a care leaver, they have one-to-one support, they have a personal advisor, where we're in touch with them, we're in touch with 98% of our young people currently. And so there are relationships, and that's what keeps them going. In terms of strategy, there's more to do in that emotional health and wellbeing space. I'm clear about that. Thank you, Virginia.
Last one. Yeah, it's just a thing that struck me when you talk. How much are you dependent on all the basic services you do? How much are you dependent on long-term funding and secure funding? Because I noticed, for instance, the Youth Funds Plus European funding ending the end of this year, and there's no guarantee. I don't think that's going to be replaced. The Kickstart, time limited. How much is that a problem for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, money, resources are always a problem for us.
Yeah.
But we have, we have statutory responsibility to provide services to care leavers. And of course, the council funds the trust to provide services to children in care and care leavers. So we have a core budget. And we, within my budget, which is about £220 million a year, we have to do all sorts of moving and shaking to ensure that we support those young people. But the issue of additional funding is a live issue, it's a real issue.
Yeah.
And what I would say to you is, we take every opportunity that we can to access any funding because we think it's a bolt-on to the core offer. So we've always got that core offer. But it's hard, and when we think, this is really working for us. But what we do, we make lots of representation to the DWP, to the DFE, to the Home Office about the things that matter. So we're in huge discussions at the moment with the Home Office around the impact of companies like
We've also got to deal with the negative things that's going around, which are not helpful at all.
No, it isn't. But we've got to find the money because statutorily we're responsible for these children.
And finally, Jenny, if you could suggest 3 recommendations for our inquiry, what would they be?
I think the first thing is for you to consider care leavers in the city having protected characteristics and signing up to that. And that would obviously be a political decision, and it would be, I'm sure, a full council decision. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for you to consider how the wider council can proactively support care leavers into employment and training. So, interviews, considering roles, and really identifying our young people as being part of the community, the family. And the third thing for me would probably be the championing of our, from a political point of view, really championing our children care and our earning. Just so earlier on, my friends and colleagues said, what more can I do? Being, finding out and perhaps seeking from me and other officers, what do you really need from us? And how can we make a difference to children and young people in our city?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you. It's been really, really useful hearing from you today. And on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. And we hope that we can get something positive for our key leaders. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you to both Tim and Ruth. I really want to thank you for coming today and for your valuable contributions. So we're just going to, yes, we're just going to sort of wrap up. We're have a discussion and reflection on today's sessions and anything on today's session. Would have talked to anything I'm not sure this. To be honest, yeah, good presentation. So, in terms of next steps, if we move on to the next steps, is the task and finish group, we've got some further evidence gathering sessions. We had one last, it was on Friday, wasn't it, when we had the University College of Birmingham and the University of Birmingham. That was really useful. I think that's the laws and class. Very interesting and useful. We have another session on Friday where we were expecting the council's youth service and University to attend. What I would the meetings, the online meetings to the rest of the community as well. If anyone wants to attend, you can welcome. And I think we have another visit on the 20th. We've got a visit to the Steel House. Again, it is for the task and finish group, but I would like to welcome anyone who's not on the task and finish group. If you would like to attend, more than welcome to join us. We'll be meeting the employability team there about the initiatives that they've got supporting graduates accessing employability opportunities. So I'm not sure we've got. We've got anything. Do we know what we've got?
Got a meeting on the 23rd, speaking to the People Centre.
Oh yes, you would have received the email about that as well. Yes. So I think that'd be interesting because I know the team were keen to meet with the part of that visit. We to visit the
First and longest.
Yes.
Yes.
Take it out. Yes. Yeah,
It's an afternoon into the evening. Just putting it on into
it's just to let the senior Fiona know if you want to attend any of those. I mean, in terms of the Friday, would it, in terms of the parking issue, would it make more sense if we, because I know in the past for visits, what committees have done if they met in one place, like council or a taxi there or something.
It's right on the train station.
Is it? So
we
we
actually need to get on the train, you know.
As I say, you can't park and walk, you know, if you're driving to the train. Yeah.
That's right.
There's a massive car park. If you were driving, just get
Okay. That's
on the shopping centre because I need to reach that.
Yeah, there's details of central parking in this.
Let's get a taxi.
You get a train station. So you sent you an email with the details on. like half people.
So then if we move on to our work programme, I'd like to Fiona to us through
Yeah, if I could just come back to the inquiry, because at the meeting on Friday, the finish group meeting, there were some work that had been discussed as part of the inquiry, but we haven't managed to arrange the meetings yet, so we're still working to get meet with a colleague from DWP. We're hoping we might be able to join.
Yeah,
Also to look at issues around race, ethnicity, skills and employment. So Birmingham University offered to put in contact with colleagues at the university who've got expertise in that area. And then also to speaking that with a local organisation as well. See if we can arrange another meeting for that. And the other organisation was able to attend the previous meeting is the Chamber of Commerce. And they're quite key to this as well, so we're trying to follow that up. Oh, okay.
It's about, well, being in the meeting. Some of the lady who was due to come can make the meeting, but they're doing some work together. And they're doing some work and to share that with us, that meeting. So
we'll maybe look for another date.
Yes.
So what I just wanted to flag is we may be contacting you to arrange some different meetings. We've used all the tasks and finish group meetings that have been planned in the calendar. But then coming on to the work programme, the next committee meeting is on the 8th of February. At the moment, there are 2 items on the work programme for that. One item is to be confirmed. So it may be that if that report doesn't come, which is on,
is it November?
Yes, it's the East Birmingham Inclusive Growth Strategy. And so, yeah, the 8th of Feb. It may be that we use that part of the meeting as part of the inquiry evidence gathering session, or maybe have one item meeting and then use part of that meeting of the task and finish group to look at recommendations. But the other bit that I don't want, obviously to be an important part of members, the most important part of the process is to then review the evidence, reach your conclusions and recommendations, and that can be done through the task and finish group work. So we'll be looking to plan meetings for that over the next couple of months, because the aim is still to get this report to City Council before the April, which should come out very quickly.
Thank you. So is that it on the programme?
I think on the work programme, it is coming around really quickly, but we're sort of coming, in terms of the work programme, we're coming up towards the end of the year now. So we've got the committee meetings that are planned. So we'll look at planning those committee meetings, but then running the inquiry alongside that to make sure that we meet the deadline of City Council. Also, the other thing I should say on the inquiry is the public call for evidence that was put on the Be Heard platform. There have been some responses, perhaps not as many as we'd hoped for. I guess some of that was maybe over the Christmas New Year period. So that is still live. So please do encourage people to respond to that. I know the CBC to all the people who've been, attending committee meetings right there to pass it on to their contacts as well.
Can we share that again on Twitter and social media as well? Okay, so moving on, the next date of our meeting, as Fiona mentioned, is the 8th of February, and again, this is it. Would you reinforce? This is beyond three.
This is
okay. So yeah, 3-4, which is just down the corridor that way. Okay, so the next item is call-ins. Have we got any requests for call-ins or petitions?
No.
Any other urgent business? No? So do I have the authority to act in between meetings?
Yes.
Thank you. So I close the meeting.